What if there was a safe space for you to explore artificial intelligence? What if there was a team of friendly professionals waiting to help you examine what you can do with AI in your courses? Welcome to the world of what if.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Jessica, for that introduction. So, I have a couple of questions for you. I want you to take a moment and think about your students. How often do they truly build on what they learned in the last module rather than just completing tasks in isolation? And when you design a course, how often do you find yourself going back to earlier concepts to deepen student mastery? Does it ever feel like you're going back and forth, playing this game of tennis, just trying to make it all connect? And how much time does this process take you? So that's the challenge that most of us face. We know that deeper learning happens when students revisit and extend their knowledge. But building that progression into a course takes time, planning, and a lot of creative energy. When I was teaching, I know that these questions were some of the things that I wrestled with a lot of the time until I found these buzzwords known as spiral curriculum. So today I'll show you how AI, when paired with a spiraling curriculum, can help you to strengthen student mastery and streamline that course design process. Because that tension between students not always building that student mastery and faculty being pressed for time is exactly where spiral curriculum and AI can quote unquote come into play. Now, a spiral curriculum is simple in theory, but very powerful in practice. And that's because the idea is, instead of treating each module as a standalone unit, we'll go ahead and see how you can intentionally design opportunities for students to revisit these key concepts, each time revisiting them with more depth and complexity. For example, when developing research skills, we might start out with having students conduct some small research and then providing a short reflection or summary. Then the following assignment, we might go ahead and have them conduct more research and then provide an annotated bibliography. And then if we keep with this progression, we'll see that towards the end of the semester, students will have worked towards a research project with multiple essential components. Now, although we're talking about this spiral shape, I would love that this diagram is displaying this concept as infinite. And that's because whenever we're building mastery in a course, it can almost feel like this never-ending spiral, or loop, where we're especially trying to figure out our way through all of these different new discoveries that are being made within that field of study. So we constantly feel like we're going back to that specific topic. So to have it as an infinite loop really drives home the fact that we're always students within our life. Constantly learning and gaining that knowledge from the environment that we're constantly interacting with every single day. So one can actually say that the experience of adulthood is this immersive spiral curriculum as well. Now, here are three key principles for effective spiral design. We have revisiting concepts repeatedly. And then after we revisit those, or while we're revisiting those concepts, we want to make sure that we're scaffolding your instruction at a deeper level each time when revisiting those concepts. Then, using prior knowledge, we want to build on those foundations with a coherent progression throughout the modular course. And this approach has actually shown to promote long-term retention. It encourages higher order thinking and gives students this clear sense of growth. But the catch, designing a spiral curriculum takes time. I know this because I spent 3 years developing a topic order into a spiraling curriculum for my high school biology course. I was a former biology teacher, environmental science, a bunch of different sciences, if you will. But biology in particular, we'll talk about for today. So after those 3 years, I would then go on to spend the next 2 years refining assignments to ensure that they all aligned with the state standards, that they were also engaging and interactive, also had differentiated instructional components for all of my remedial versions that I needed created for all of my lower level students, students with disabilities, English language learners. I also had extension assignments for all of my higher level students while balancing my schedule and the thousands of tasks that I had to juggle so that then I could find time to focus and reflect on that progression to see if that curriculum was a direct catalyst to student mastery within the standards of that module. That's a lot. And after all that, I didn't even have rubrics for my assessments. So that's where AI can come in as your creative partner. Now, generative tools like Microsoft Copilot and ChatGPT are great at accelerating the design process. And that's because they can quickly rewrite prompts to fit Bloom's taxonomy, scaffold your assessments to increase difficulty, or summarize and adapt content for different levels of learners. Now, I want you to think of AI as your own personal thought partner. And that's because they're there to complete the task for you that you would otherwise have to take up majority of your time to complete yourself. It's not replacing you. It's just simply amplifying, your ideas. You provide the vision and expertise, and AI will help you to generate drafts, variations, and structured scaffolds in minutes rather than hours. Now, the result, you can go ahead and focus more on creativity, alignment, your teaching impact, while AI will handle the repetitive heavy lifting. So let's go ahead and walk through a couple of frameworks that I developed for enhancing course design while using ChatGPT and put this into practice. We'll see how 2 of these frameworks can actually help with instantly creating or rearranging your curriculum. And if we do have time, I do have a third one that we can take a look at, but if not, it'll go into your virtual goodie bags at the end of today or at the end of the presentation. Now, although I did develop these using ChatGPT, you can also use these within Microsoft Copilot or also within FAU's OWLsy AI, known as OWL1. And OWL1 is actually a tool that I discovered when I was perusing through OIT's AI resources. And to access this, you'll just simply go to fau.edu/AI/OWL1. And this is where you'll be prompted to launch OWL1 to log in with your fau.edu email and password. And then you can also take a look at some of the agents that some of your colleagues have already started to create and provide proof of concepts as well. Now, I do want to take a moment to discuss how I created my frameworks. And it was essentially through trial and error. I took note of all of the good outputs through the many AI outputs that I received that I did not like. And once I was finished with my project, I went ahead and went back and compiled all of those prompts together that gave me my intended outcome. And then I reformatted and workshopped them in order to create them into chunks so that way I can provide graduated steps when I'm working with AI rather than overloading it with that task up front. And that's because I find that when I do that, it actually is able to focus on that material better. Now, the key to effective assistance is using these structured prompts to specify your pedagogical needs. And these frameworks that I created help AI understand what I need when designing a course or curriculum or brainstorming assessments with a professor. Also, be sure to use different AI tools, and that's because they can provide you with various different results that are useful for your specific discipline and teaching style. So let's go ahead and get into our first framework here, which is creating a spiral curriculum. Now, it does look a little bit daunting because it's kind of long, but again, like I said, it's in graduated steps. I have my first prompt here, where how can we use U4, and then you insert your particular course topic or title. Then we'll get into the second prompt, which is actually 2 that I formatted together, but I felt that they were good and beneficial to speaking to AI at one time. So I let it know that I'm teaching this particular course and I'm going to say high school biology because that's my expertise and that's where I was able to, accurately assess the outputs that it was providing me. And I tell it that usually I feel like I'm playing tennis within my curriculum, and I like to have more of a spiral design and progression. And I ask it to go ahead and create that spiral curriculum for me, so that way I can have students move from one concept to the next to see the big picture by the end of the semester. And the biggest thing is that I wanted to provide me with an analysis explaining why that next topic builds upon the previous, because sometimes it'll provide me with a rationale that I hadn't considered. And maybe that would push me to move that specific module in between module 1 and 3 or module 5 and 7 or something of that nature. Lastly, we have thank you, because I always like to thank AI just in case, the machines take over. I grew up watching The Matrix and Terminator and all those movies. So I always say my pleases and thank yous just in case they remember and, but I'll ask you to explore ways to integrate concepts of spiral curriculum into the course by creating assessments, so that now I can get examples of how to create spiral design, or see how some assessments that I already have that it might, output to me can actually be considered within my new spiral course. So let's take a look at ChatGPT and Copilot. I'm going to go ahead and split screen my screen, and one new feature within Google Chrome, if you didn't know, is you can split view your tabs. So if you right click on one specific tab you want to view, click add tab to new split view, you can then go ahead and find that next tab that you're looking for. I'm looking for Copilot, and there it is for me. Okay, so now I have this really nice split view going on. So I do have a typo here. How was we? I'm so sorry. It's supposed to say, how can we use you? And it'll go ahead and provide me with all this information to say how we can use AI to study biology in relation to the environment and the world. Now on the left side is ChatGPT, the right side is Copilot. The left side, ChatGPT said we can use it to break down concepts for comparative perspectives, real-world applications, for study tools, step-by-step problem solving. Copilot provided a little bit more of a tiered approach. It said that it can explore these biology topics with students, then how it can be used practically in order to teach or learn the content, and then also example activities. So next, after looking through all that, taking some notes, really thinking about how I want to have that progression, yes, it's going to provide me with something, but as you'll see later on, whatever AI provides you with is not finite. It's just a draft, and you can go ahead and make changes wherever you want to further tailor it to what you want, or you can ask it to redesign or fix it for you yourself. So moving further, I provided my second prompt, and here's where it provided my spiraling biology curriculum. Now we'll see that both of them start out with an introduction or foundations of biology. On the left side, ChatGPT says we'll talk about characteristics of life, levels of organization, scientific method. Copilot says we'll talk about scientific method, lab safety, very important, observation and inference, as well as experimental design. Now, because I have already taught this before, I know that I'm going to teach all of those subjects. And I would compile all those together, but make 2 modules within that unit. One discussing scientific thinking for scientific method, observation and inference, experimental design. The other one discussing your characteristics of life and what is life in general, the difference between living and non-living. Now, one other thing I want to talk about is right here, right off the bat, Unit 1, we are discussing spiral design. And that's something that I noticed in a lot of science courses, and it's something that I noticed in a lot of English courses, various different your gen ed courses. We do have this progression where we're building upon the previous class of that same subject in that lower level or that lower grade. Okay, so when we get into scientific method in that 9th and 10th grade, we're adding in observation and inference so students can understand that their observations to form their hypotheses are different from their inferences to form their conclusions. We're now getting into more of experimental design to see how your independent variable does affect your dependent variable, and then how we can extrapolate that from a graph or a table. To further this progression of spiral design, we now get into Unit 2. Both are talking about biochemistry or chemistry of life. Same thing, they're synonyms with each other or synonymous phrases. And both we'll see are talking about atoms, molecules, water properties, and macromolecules. However, Copilot is talking about enzymes. That's very important for Unit 2. So I really like that Copilot is considering that Not sure why ChatGPT didn't add that, but again, that's why we use different tools to get different information. So in ChatGPT, it said that we're building on Unit 1 because life is chemical at its foundation, and understanding molecules provides raw materials for cell structure and function, which is the next unit right here for Unit 3. On the right side for Copilot, it's building on the scientific method because now students can apply experimental design to chemical reactions and enzymatic activity. And why it's next is because, just like ChatGPT said, we're building from molecules to see why they're essential before studying cells, which are next within Unit 3. Now, Unit 3, very similar, prokaryotic versus eukaryotic cells, organelles, membranes transport, but Copilot is becoming my best friend here, where it's adding another additional important component regarding homeostasis, which is another foundational component that I would actually add within Unit 2. I'll talk about that a little bit further in our next example or next demo. And then we have down here energy in cells. We can see that they have this nice natural progression that both of them are outputting similar information, but we have DNA structure, replication, transcription, translation here for genetics. That's not present here in Copilot on the right. So similar progression, but they're focusing on different subtopics. So that brings me to my next framework. Because a lot of us have already taught our courses. We have the topics, or we know the specific topics that we want to teach to our students. So we don't need ChatGPT to tell us, oh, you should teach this one, or you should teach this one. But instead, why don't we provide it with our curriculum that we currently have and see how ChatGPT would take those topics and put it into that natural spiral progression. So it's the same exact framework. The only difference, same 3 prompts, but the only difference is I now added in my topic order. And you don't have to have 15 modules or 15 different topics. I was just trying to accommodate for a 15-week course. However, I know some of us have 6-week courses, 9 module courses, various different things like that. So you can always just put in your specific topics. Now, one other thing that I did that's different, which you'll see here, but I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. I'm going to go ahead and split screen my screen again because I want to see how ChatGPT will focus on the same material but provide different outputs. Just for this first question here regarding how would you use, or how would we use you to study biology? So we'll see here, and then I'll get back to my next point in just a moment. But we'll see here that with the same exact prompt, the left side with my first framework, even though it doesn't know I'm using a different framework because I use the same prompt, this is the top of my chat here, we're breaking down concepts on the left side. We can use it to have comparative perspectives, real-world applications, study tools, and step-by-step problem solving. On the right side, we're building foundations, which is very similar to breaking down concepts. It's the opposite, if you will, but for the same type of outcome. We're now connecting biology to the environment, different from comparative perspectives. Linking biology to the world, which is similar to real-world applications. We're now getting into active learning for simulations, projects, and research skills instead of study tools, diagrams, flashcards, practice, and case studies. We also have multiple perspectives instead of step-by-step problem solving. So the same prompts went ahead and produced different results. And I see that we have a question, but just one note here before I answer that question. I just wanted to point out that it did provide some similar content. We have comparative perspectives versus multiple perspectives, but we can see how it's providing that content slightly differently as well. Yes, we have a question online.
Yeah, the question we have online is, how were you able to split your screen?
How was I able to split my screen? Okay, so if I go ahead and go to, let's go to this screen right here because I don't want to reveal a future tab. So I'm going to go to that tab that I'm working on, and I'm going to right click on that tab. And then I will bring it down in that menu to that second line that's right there. And it says add tab to new split view. When I click on that, my current tab will move to the left, and I'll have a menu here to open up any tab that I want to within my current window. So then I'm going to go ahead and choose this OWL1 window just for the purposes of today. And now I'm able to split screen my view. If I wanted to separate them, I do the exact same thing. Right click, arrange split view, and then you'll be able to separate those views as well. Let me bring that back over here. I think that goes there. Okay. Yes, that goes there. Okay. So, all right, no problem. Moving into how it created my spiral curriculum based off of my established topics. I'm gonna go ahead and separate my views so that we can just focus on this screen right here. Now, if you notice, I did provide it with my main topics, but I also provided subtopics because I wanted to know the specific subtopics that I go over within my course. So it went ahead and provided me with same thing as before, foundations of biology, characteristics of life, scientific method, experimental design, levels of organization. Moving into unit 2, same thing again, chemistry of life, atoms, molecules, water properties, macromolecules for the 4 different types are enzymes and biochemical reactions. I'm going to group biochemical reactions in my mind as homeostasis and metabolism, but we'll see if it puts that there or not. Moving into, and we'll see why it's next. Again, same thing as before. Life is built from matter and chemistry, and we need to understand the basics of macromolecules, which are the building blocks, and enzymes in those biochemical reactions, so that we can directly understand cellular processes as we move into Unit 3 for cell biology. Now, this is the first time we're seeing cell theory, but that's because I gave it that subtopic to focus on and add it in to see where it fits within my curriculum. Because again, 9th and 10th grade course, very important to talk about cell theory. We even talk about it at a collegiate level, but way more in depth for, again, that spiral progression of design within your scientific career. So why is this next? Cells are the basic unit of life. They house macromolecules and reactions from Unit 2, and we need to see this in order to see how these metabolical pieces spiral back to chemistry from our enzymes, molecules, and energy. And these metabolical or metabolic pieces of photosynthesis and respiration don't happen without our cells. So that's why it's in between, or that's why we're seeing that natural progression into membrane transport and cellular respiration before we get into our genetics. Now, I also went ahead and I asked OWL 1 for a spiral curriculum as well based off of my particular topics. It provided me foundations, chemistry of life, cells, but notice the difference here. We're now getting, instead of going straight into genetics, like I previously saw here in Unit 4, Unit 4 is actually, we're moving from cells to organisms. And that's because there's a lot of information about cells that we have to offload that's going to take us to genetics. It'll take us to evolution. It'll take us to ecology. It'll take us to human biology. And so we need to make sure that we provide the foundational standpoint, not just in biology, but the foundations of cells. So now we're going to break those into subunits as well, or separate units. So I asked it for a side-by-side comparison. And just for visualization purposes, I'm going to go ahead and change to this screen so we can see it better. But same thing as before, how we can see introduction to biology, chemistry of life, our cell biology, our genetics. But notice here, this is where we start to differ. Genetics, or as OWL 1 gave me, from cells to organisms. As we move further, we have evolution on the left. And now OWL 1 says, now we can go ahead and move into genetics and information flow. And now we see how things are really starting to differ. Now this middle column here, this left column is something that I would have been provided as a first-year teacher from fellow teachers. This is the natural progression that we were given from the district that follows along with the textbook that we assigned with. And then in finding that, yes, I can teach that, but I can rearrange it how I want to, my own personal freedom as a teacher, I then went ahead and said, okay, this, like I said, took me, this part didn't take me 3 years. I would say this curriculum right here took me 2 years of figuring out this progression. And then taking a look at my students' data, the EOC scores, and realizing, EOC standing for end of course exam, I realized I can further create more of a progression for the big picture. So how can I do that? So my version, I'm combining things a lot. where we're going to talk about what is life, the characteristics and organization. We're going to talk about scientific method and inquiry, but now we're going to focus on the levels of organization. And the reason why I put all levels is because there was one day I was sitting in my classroom, I'm just staring at this image because I was just talking about ecology. And it was the first time that I had gone into the levels of organization at ecology according to the curriculum that I was provided. And I was just like, there it is. There's the big picture, all the way from the smallest unit of atoms to the biggest unit, which is the entire planet, the biosphere. So if I just rearrange my topics into the levels, there's my spiral curriculum. That's where my third year, I figured that out, the light bulb that literally took ChatGPT 45 seconds to provide me with. So that's where we see that that spiral curriculum and AI is so beneficial to you for saving so much time. Because then I'm able to say chemistry of life. We're going to spiral back to unit 1. And we're going to see how now we're going to focus on just this first level from moving from atoms to molecules. And we'll see how these molecules can build up into water and why it's important, our macromolecules, as well as enzyme activity. And I added in from before when I saw that ChatGPT or Copilot provided homeostasis and metabolism later on, I'm introducing it in unit 2. So that students can see metabolism at a dietary standpoint with macromolecules, and they can see homeostasis at an enzymatic standpoint when enzymes go ahead and build things up and break things down to bring that body back to homeostasis during illness or whatever it is, even after eating their lunch that they're thinking about instead of paying attention in my class. So moving into the next module, we'll see that now I'm moving from molecules to cells. So going back to Module 1 for levels of organization to put it into perspective so that they can constantly get to that big picture. Because now we can see we're getting into how those macromolecules build up those organelles, their structure, so how that they, to better understand how they function. And then we're going to see those various different types of cells or organelles within plants and animal cells. We'll also see the differences between prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells from the different cell types up here. Moving further into Unit 4, you can see I completely went different. I don't have membrane and transport up here as well as energy in cells. That's a lot of content. It's a lot of information. So even though I'm focusing on spiraling my curriculum, I still want to chunk my lessons so that that way students can digest the information to better have a long-term retention. So that's why I pushed it down here to Unit 4 just for chunking purposes. And now getting to Unit 5. We're all completely different here. Original traditional outline, we have evolution. OWL 1 provided me with genetics. And you'll see here, I'm actually moving into from cells to organisms. Now, this is where I wanted to add in DNA replication, various different things like that, because that is where we're pushing from seeing how these cells start to function with each other to now how they're starting to build up that particular organism. This is where we go back to homeostasis, spiraling again, okay? So this 3 years, now I just displayed to you within what took me 45 seconds with ChatGPT with just those specific prompts. So here's that third framework. We don't have enough time for today, but again, it'll go into your goodie bag. Just one prompt, but it's really easy. Take a prompt that you have, like a specific assessment prompt that you have, and insert it after this prompt, or upload a file along with this prompt and see what AI is able to output for you in terms of just a plain chart like this and suggesting maybe observational-based assessments or creating creative demonstrations by, generating a visual timeline or an infographic. So really redeveloping how you would provide assessments to your students for an authentic experience. Now, I know that interacting with AI for the first time or integrating AI into your course and assessments can seem very daunting. So I want you to start small, okay? Maybe just try one task of creating a spiral curriculum or retrofitting assessments into your spiral curriculum that you found online or that was provided to you. Maybe creating just one AI-assisted assignment or redesigning an assignment that you already have as more of an authentic assessment. Or you can always just request an open lab service for us to come and assist you. And lastly, be sure that you always get student feedback on that connected learning experience so that way you're able to make improvements on your assessments for the following semester. Other tips and tricks that I have for you is to think of AI as your intern and just have a conversation with it. How you would explain something to a human is how you would explain it to AI. The only difference is it's just faster at completing what you ask for. Okay? Next is to stay organized. I find that when I'm using my different frameworks, I want to open them up in different chats and then label those different chats so that I can easily reference them in future weeks. Sometimes when I'm working in an individual module, I also do find that I want to work in an individual chat per module so that way that AI can keep its focus on those specific module objectives that I provided, so it can create assignments that are specifically tailored to those objectives. And lastly, don't forget to use prompt frameworks because using templates are always a more efficient way to work. Now, here are my references in case you're interested, where I received my information from Spiraling Curriculum. And then I also used Gamma in order to create my website here. And some resources to support your journey. Please check out FAU's curated collection of AI resources, tools, and other materials that are supported by the university. You can also explore on Canvas Commons a variety of 64 AI-assisted assignments that you can tailor to suit your unique course requirements. And I'm a new mom, so I love handing out goodie bags after a gathering. And so as part of your goodie bag for today, you'll have access to the frameworks that I did develop. You'll just have to scan the QR codes that'll be listed at the end of the presentation in order to be able to view and download a copy. Or if you're online, you can simply click on the links in the chat and be able to download a copy that way. All right, thank you so much everyone for exploring this with me today. Remember that you don't have to redesign your course overnight. With AI as your partner, you can make small spiraled enhancements that lead to mastery over time. So thank you so much everyone, and just